I am Velma, 29 years old, and I once had everything: a loving father, a future in his thriving tech company, and the promise of a $4.8 million inheritance. Then my stepsister Audrey wormed her way into my father's heart while he was dying. She convinced him I was stealing from him. In his final moments, Dad changed his will, leaving me nothing. When I tried to explain, my stepmother slapped me and screamed to get out. I left penniless, heartbroken, and alone. But 3 months later, they opened a safety deposit box that changed everything. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below, hit that like and subscribe button to hear how I reclaimed not just my inheritance but my family's shattered trust. My childhood was nothing short of magical. My father, Marcus, was a brilliant mind in the tech industry, founding Quantum Secure when I was just a baby. He built security software for major corporations, and by the time I was 10, his company had become a major player in Silicon Valley. But what made him special wasn't his business acumen or his wealth. It was how he remained completely devoted to our little family despite his success. Mom was his rock. Sarah Thompson Winters, with her warm smile and endless patience. She had been Dad's college sweetheart, and their love story was my favorite bedtime tale. They built everything together, from their first apartment, where they ate ramen on milk crates, to our beautiful home in Palo Alto, with its sprawling garden where Mom grew her prized roses. Every Sunday was family day. Dad would shut off his phone and we'd go sailing on the bay. Those were my favorite moments, the three of us against the world, with the wind in our hair and possibilities as endless as the horizon. Dad taught me to navigate by stars, to understand weather patterns, and most importantly, to trust my instincts when the waters got rough. The sea doesn't forgive hesitation, Velma, he'd say. When you know what's right, act with confidence. Little did I know how important that lesson would become. Everything changed when I turned 15. Mom's cancer diagnosis came suddenly. Advanced pancreatic already spread. 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. Dad and I clung to each other through the storm of grief. Some nights I'd find him in his study, staring at Mom's photo, tears silently streaming down his face. Other nights he'd come sit on the edge of my bed, and we'd share memories of her until the pain felt a little more bearable. For 2 years, it was just us. I grew up quickly, learning to manage the household while keeping up with school. Dad threw himself into work, expanding the company internationally. The house felt empty without Mom's laughter, but we were healing slowly, finding a new normal. Then Diana entered our lives. Dad met her at a charity gala, tall, elegant, with a sophisticated charm that seemed to breathe life back into him. I was 17 by then, and initially I was happy to see Dad smile again. Diana was a widow herself, with a daughter my age, named Audrey. On paper, we were a perfect match, two broken families finding wholeness together. The first time I met Audrey, she hugged me and called me sister. She had this bubbly personality that drew people in, always laughing, always the center of attention. She complimented my room, asked about my interests, and seemed genuinely excited about our families merging. I remember feeling hopeful that night, thinking maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Dad and Diana married just 6 months after meeting. They wanted a small ceremony, but Diana insisted on a lavish affair at the Fairmont Hotel. Looking back, that should have been my first warning sign. Diana always wanted more than what was offered. As graduation approached, I applied to business schools, determined to follow in Dad's footsteps. When I got accepted to Stanford's business program, Dad was ecstatic. He started bringing me to board meetings, teaching me the ins and outs of Quantum Secure, clearly grooming me to take over someday. "You have your mother's compassion and my business sense," he'd tell me proudly. "That's an unbeatable combination." Meanwhile, Audrey chose a different path. She jumped from major to major in college, first psychology, then communications, then marketing. She never seemed to finish anything she started. Diana always defended her, saying Audrey was finding herself, but Dad would frown when tuition bills arrived for another semester of switched classes. Little things started happening around the house. My mother's jewelry would be moved from where I kept it. Family photos would be rearranged, with fewer featuring Mom and more showcasing Diana and Audrey. When I mentioned it to Dad, he suggested I was being oversensitive. "They're family now, Velma," he'd say. "We have to make room for new memories while honoring the old ones." Diana subtly began pushing for renovations to the house, wanting to erase Mom's touches, the hand-painted kitchen tiles, the reading nook with built-in bookshelves. Dad initially resisted but gradually gave in to keep the peace. As I progressed through business school, the dynamics at home grew more strained. Diana would schedule family events when she knew I had exams. Audrey would borrow my clothes without asking, returning them stained or damaged. When confronted, she'd bat her eyes and say, "That's what sisters do right." They weren't major offenses, nothing I could point to definitively. Just a constant undercurrent of feeling unwelcome in my own home. Dad noticed sometimes trying to bridge the gap with family dinners, or suggesting Audrey and I spend more time together. He couldn't see that his new wife was slowly isolating him from me. After graduation, I took a position at Quantum Secure as planned. Dad beamed with pride at my early successes, and we fell into a comfortable routine of lunch meetings where he'd mentor me on leadership. Those moments felt sacred, echoes of our sailing days, just the two of us navigating rough waters together. Audrey, now 27 like me, still hadn't found a stable career. She worked briefly at a PR firm, then a fashion magazine, then as a personal assistant to a local politician. Nothing stuck. Yet somehow her lifestyle never suffered. Designer clothes, exotic vacations, a luxury apartment downtown that Diana insisted Dad help pay for until Audrey finds her footing. Things took a darker turn when Dad turned 68. During his annual physical, doctors discovered a congenital heart condition that had gone undetected. His prognosis wasn't immediately dire, but the doctor warned that stress could exacerbate his condition. Diana used this to control his schedule, screening his calls and visitors for his health. More and more, I found my time with Dad limited, supervised, or canceled last minute. Audrey, however, was suddenly his constant companion, driving him to appointments, organizing his medications, whispering concerns in Diana's ear about how worked up Dad got after my visits. I tried maintaining the peace for Dad's sake. His health was the priority, and fighting with Diana and Audrey would only cause him stress. So I smiled through tense family dinners where Diana dominated conversation. I said nothing when Audrey casually mentioned taking Dad sailing, our special activity, and described him teaching her the very same navigation techniques he'd taught me years ago. The night of Dad's 69th birthday, I overheard Diana and Audrey talking in the kitchen after everyone else had gone home. "Marcus mentioned updating his will again," Diana said softly. "I think we need to accelerate our timeline." "Don't worry," Audrey replied. "I have everything under control. By the time I'm done, he'll see exactly who really cares about him." I stood frozen in the hallway, a chill running down my spine. In that moment, I knew we were headed for a storm worse than any Dad and I had weathered on the bay. And this time, I wasn't sure either of us would make it safely to shore. The morning after Dad's birthday celebration, everything changed. He collapsed while getting ready for work, and the frantic ride to the hospital remains the most terrifying drive of my life. The diagnosis hit like a physical blow. His heart condition had deteriorated rapidly. The doctors gave him 6 months, maybe less. "I'd like to spend this time at home," Dad said weakly from his hospital bed, his once commanding voice now thin and fragile, "with all my family around me." I immediately requested a leave of absence from Quantum Secure. The board was understanding. Most had known my father for decades and considered him family. I moved back into my old bedroom to help with his care despite Diana's obvious displeasure. "We have the situation handled," she insisted when I arrived with my suitcases. "You'll just disrupt the routine we've established." "He's my father," I replied simply. "I'm staying." The first few weeks established a tense pattern. I'd wake early to spend quiet morning hours with Dad, helping him with breakfast and medication before Diana emerged from her separate bedroom around 9. She claimed Dad's condition required her to sleep undisturbed, but I suspected she simply didn't want the burden of night checks. Dad and I would talk about the company, reminisce about Mom, or sometimes just sit in comfortable silence while he read and I worked remotely on my laptop. These precious moments seemed to strengthen him. His color would improve and he'd even laugh occasionally. But the moment Diana or Audrey appeared, the atmosphere would shift. They'd make comments about how tired Dad looked, suggesting my presence was draining him. They'd interrupt our conversations with trivial matters or schedule unnecessary visitors during our time together. Audrey's sudden interest in the family business struck me as particularly suspicious. She began asking Dad detailed questions about Quantum Secure's contracts, intellectual property holdings, and succession plans. Dad, perhaps flattered by her newfound interest, answered openly. It's good to see you taking an interest in the legacy, Audrey, he told her one afternoon while I silently seethed. Quantum Secure will need strong leadership when I'm gone. The implication hung in the air like a storm cloud. I'd devoted my entire education and career to preparing for this role. Audrey had shown zero interest for years. Yet Dad was entertaining the idea of her involvement. It made no sense. As days passed, strange occurrences multiplied. Important papers would go missing from Dad's study, only to reappear in different locations. His medication schedule would be disrupted because pills were accidentally misplaced. His laptop, containing important business documents, AT, frequently showed signs of having been accessed when he was resting. One evening, I walked past the guest house where Audrey was staying and overheard her on the phone. "Yes, I know exactly what I'm doing," she was saying. "The old man is declining faster than expected. We need to ensure the will is ironclad before he becomes too confused." I confronted her the next day, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Audrey, I heard you on the phone last night discussing Dad's will. Is there something going on I should know about?" She blinked innocently, her expression perfectly calibrated for maximum believability. "What? Oh, I was talking to the estate lawyer. Diana asked me to check if everything was in order with Dad's healthcare directives. You know how she worries." Her explanation sounded plausible, but something in her eyes, a calculating coldness, sent chills through me. Later that week, Dad's personal physician visited for a home checkup. I noticed immediately how much worse Dad seemed during the appointment, confused, agitated, and far more symptomatic than he'd been at breakfast. After the doctor left, I checked Dad's medication tray and noticed his pills looked different. "Dad, have they changed your medication?" I asked. He frowned. "No. Diana handles all that. Why do you ask?" Before I could answer, Diana swept into the room. "Marcus needs rest now, Velma. Why don't you go run those errands you mentioned?" I hadn't mentioned any errands. That night at dinner, Audrey casually brought up several valuable items from Dad's collection that had gone missing recently. "It's so strange," she said wide-eyed. "The antique pocket watch from Grandfather, that first edition Hemingway, even Mom's pearl earrings, all disappeared." Dad looked troubled. These were treasured possessions with both financial and sentimental value. "When did you notice this, Princess?" he asked Audrey. "Just this week," she replied. "I've been helping catalog everything for insurance purposes. Another task I'd never heard mentioned before." Diana placed a comforting hand on Dad's arm. "Don't worry yourself, Marcus. We'll figure it out." The meaningful look that passed between them sent a spike of anxiety through me. Later that night, I overheard them talking in Dad's study. "I don't want to believe it either," Diana was saying softly, "but the evidence is concerning. The missing items, the strange behavior, the secretive phone calls." "Velma wouldn't steal from me," Dad protested weakly. "She's my daughter." "People change when money's involved," Audrey chimed in, "especially with the company valuation so high now." I stood outside the door, heart pounding. They were setting me up, creating a narrative of me as a thief planting seeds of doubt in my father's mind when he was at his most vulnerable. The following morning, Dad could barely look at me during breakfast. When I reached for his hand, he flinched slightly. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Just tired," he murmured. A family dinner 2 nights later became the turning point. Diana had invited several of Dad's oldest friends and business associates, people who had known me my entire life. Throughout the evening, Audrey skillfully wove a narrative about my concerning behavior. "I'm just worried about Velma," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "She seems so stressed lately. Last week I found her in Dad's study at 3 a.m, going through his desk. I nearly choked on my water. That never happened." Dad's friends looked uncomfortable. Diana sighed dramatically. "Velma, please. We're all trying to help." "Help with what? This is insane." I looked desperately at Dad, but he was staring at his plate. Audrey continued her performance. "We've all noticed the memory lapses, the mood swings. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Grief affects people differently." The implication was clear. I was unstable, possibly stealing, definitely not to be trusted. And my father, weakened by illness and manipulated by Diana and Audrey, was beginning to believe it. After dinner, I tried to speak privately with Dad, but Diana intercepted me. "He's exhausted, Velma. Whatever it is, can wait until morning." But in the morning, a lawyer arrived to meet with Dad privately. I recognized him as Gerald Hoffman, not our usual family attorney, but someone new. The meeting lasted 2 hours, and when they emerged, Dad looked drained, and Hoffman avoided eye contact with me entirely. That evening, I made one final attempt to break through the wall they'd built around my father. "Dad, please, talk to me. What's happening? Why was Hoffman here?" Dad sighed heavily, looking suddenly much older than his years. "Velma, some things have been brought to my attention that concern me deeply." "Whatever they told you, it's not true." I insisted, feeling panic rise in my throat. "Audrey and Diana are manipulating you." He shook his head slowly. "They showed me the evidence, Velma. Items from my collection found in your room. Emails from your account discussing selling off company assets after I'm gone." "What emails? I never wrote anything like that, Dad. They're setting me up." But I could see in his eyes, clouded by medication and exhaustion, that doubt had taken root. The strong, decisive man who taught me to trust my instincts on rough waters was fading, replaced by someone confused and afraid. "I need time to think," he said finally. "Please, just give me some space." As I left his room, I saw Audrey watching from the shadows of the hallway, a small, triumphant smile playing at the corner of her mouth. In that moment, I knew the storm I'd feared had arrived, and I was already being pulled under by the current. The morning after my confrontation with Dad, I woke to raised voices coming from his bedroom. Hurrying down the hallway in my pajamas, I found Diana standing over Dad's bed holding my purse. "Explain this," she demanded when she saw me in the doorway. "That's my purse," I said, confused. "Why do you have it?" Diana dumped the contents onto Dad's bedspread. Among my normal belongings tumbled out Dad's missing antique pocket watch and Mom's pearl earrings, the very items Audrey had reported missing. "These were found in your bag, which was hidden behind the false panel in your closet," Diana said coldly. My blood ran cold. "That's impossible. I didn't take those things. Someone planted them there." Dad was propped up against his pillows, his face ashen. "The panel in your closet. Only your mother and I knew about that hiding spot. We showed you when you were 12. The betrayal in his eyes cut deeper than any knife. How could I explain that while I knew about the hiding spot, I hadn't used it to conceal stolen items? "Dad, please," I begged. "I'm being set up. Why would I steal things that are eventually going to be mine anyway? It makes no sense." "Perhaps because you need money now," Diana suggested smoothly. "Or perhaps because you're not thinking clearly. Either way, this behavior is deeply concerning." I turned to my father. "Dad, you know me. You know I would never steal from you." He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "I thought I knew you, Velma." Diana escorted me from the room, her grip painfully tight on my arm. In the hallway, she hissed, "Stop making this harder than it needs to be. Your father is dying. Do you want his last memories of you to be this disgrace?" I pulled away from her. "This is your doing. Yours and Audrey's. I don't know what game you're playing, but I won't let you manipulate him like this." Diana's carefully composed face hardened. "I'm trying to protect a sick old man from a daughter who's clearly lost her way. Don't test me, Velma." The next few days became a surreal nightmare. I found more of my personal items mysteriously appearing near Dad's valuable collections, my hair tie near his first edition books, my lip balm by his coin collection. Each discovery was promptly reported to Dad by either Diana or Audrey, building their case against me. My attempts to speak privately with Dad were constantly thwarted. Diana claimed my presence agitated him, raising his blood pressure to dangerous levels. The home health nurse recently hired by Diana, and clearly under her influence, backed these claims. 5 days after the purse incident, Dad's longtime lawyer, Martin Reeves, visited the house. I managed to intercept him in the driveway as he was leaving. "Martin, what's going on? Why was Gerald Hoffman here last week?" I asked desperately. Martin looked troubled. "Velma, I'm not supposed to discuss this with you." "Please," I begged. "Something is very wrong here." He glanced toward the house, then lowered his voice. "Your father is considering changes to his will. Significant changes. Diana brought in Hoffman because I expressed concerns about her influence." My stomach dropped. They're trying to cut me out completely, aren't they? Martin's silence was answer enough. Later that day, I used Dad's laptop while he napped, hoping to find evidence of tampering. What I discovered chilled me to the bone. In his email account were messages supposedly from me to an anonymous buyer discussing selling off Quantum Secure's patents and client list after Dad's death. The emails detailed plans to liquidate company assets for quick cash rather than maintaining the business as Dad had always intended. But I had never written these emails. Someone had created a fake account using my name, or worse, had accessed my actual account. Either way, they were framing me as not just a petty thief, but as someone planning to dismantle my father's life's work. I was taking screenshots as evidence when Audrey walked in. "What are you doing on Dad's computer?" she asked, her voice dripping with false concern. Finding proof that I'm being framed, I replied, not bothering to hide my actions. Audrey smiled. Not her usual performative, bubbly smile, but something colder, more calculating. "No one's going to believe you, you know. Not after everything we've set up." The mask had slipped. "So you admit you're setting me up?" She shrugged casually. "Let's call it. Ensuring what I deserve comes to me. Diana and I have put up with Marcus for years. We've earned this." "He's my father," I said through gritted teeth. "And he gave you and Diana everything." "Not everything," Audrey replied. "Not the company, not the bulk of the estate. Those were always going to you, Daddy's precious little girl. You've never even cared about the business." "I care about what it's worth," she said simply. $4.8 million at the last valuation plus the house and investments. Why should you get all that just because your mother happened to marry him first?" I was stunned by her casual cruelty. "You won't get away with this. Dad will see through you eventually." Audrey laughed. "He doesn't have eventually, Velma. He has weeks, maybe days. And right now he believes exactly what we want him to believe." As if to prove her point, Dad appeared in the doorway supported by Diana. His face went from confusion to anger when he saw me at his computer. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice weak but furious. Before I could explain, Audrey began crying theatrically. "I caught her going through your emails, Dad. She was deleting things." "That's not true," I protested. "I was finding evidence of how they're framing me." Dad shook his head slowly, disappointment etched in every line of his face. "More lies, Velma. When will it end?" Diana guided him back to bed, shooting me a triumphant look over her shoulder. That night, I tried one last desperate attempt to reach my father. I snuck into his room after Diana had retired to her separate bedroom. He was awake, staring at the ceiling. "Dad," I whispered, "please listen to me. Just for 5 minutes." He turned tired eyes toward me. "What more can you possibly say, Velma? They're manipulating you. Everything. The missing items, the emails, it's all fabricated. Think about it logically. Why would I steal things that would eventually be mine? Why would I plan to dismantle the company I've spent my whole life preparing to lead?" For a brief moment, doubt flickered in his eyes. "Then explain the evidence. Explain how your things keep appearing near my collections. Explain those emails." "I can't," I admitted. "Not fully. But I know Audrey and Diana are behind it. They want what was meant for me." Dad sighed heavily. "Do you know what Audrey said when I told her about my diagnosis? She said she'd put her life on hold to care for me. No conditions, no expectations." "And you believed her, after watching her bounce from job to job for years, never committing to anything." "At least she's here out of love, not greed," he said, his words cutting deep. "She has no expectation of inheritance." I couldn't hold back my bitter laugh. "Is that what she told you, Dad? I overheard her discussing your will with Diana months ago. They've been planning this." "Enough." His voice rose, then broke into coughing. "I can't take these accusations anymore." The commotion brought Diana running. She took in the scene, Dad coughing me, standing desperately by his bed, and made her move. "Get out," she shouted. "Look what you've done to him. His heart can't take this stress." "Dad, please," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "Remember what you taught me about the sea, about trusting my instincts when the waters get rough. Trust yours now. Look past what they're showing you and see the truth." But my father turned away, either unwilling or unable to hear me through the fog of manipulation that surrounded him. Diana physically pushed me from the room, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my arm. "You've done enough damage," she hissed. "Stay away from him if you have any decency left." As I stumbled back to my room, I heard Audrey on the phone in the guest house again. "It's working perfectly," she was saying. "The final confrontation happened tonight. Call Hoffman first thing tomorrow. Marcus is ready to make the changes official." I leaned against the wall, feeling the last of my hope drain away. The storm had hit with full force, and I was going under. The next morning dawned with an eerie calm that belied the emotional hurricane brewing inside our home. I hadn't slept, my mind racing with desperate plans to expose Diana and Audrey's manipulation. But every scenario ended the same way, with my word against theirs and my father's faith in me already shattered. Around 9, Gerald Hoffman arrived, carrying his leather briefcase. Diana intercepted me as I tried to follow him to Dad's room. "This doesn't concern you," she said coldly. "It's my father changing his will to disinherit me based on lies," I replied. "It absolutely concerns me." Diana's perfect mask slipped for a moment, revealing the calculated ruthlessness beneath. "You brought this on yourself. If you'd just played along, accepted your place in this family instead of always acting entitled to everything because you're his real daughter." She caught herself composing her features back into concern. "Marcus needs peace now, not more of your dramatics." I pushed past her, ignoring her protests. In Dad's room, Hoffman was setting up papers on a portable table across Dad's lap. Audrey stood by the window watching with poorly concealed anticipation. "Dad," I said quietly, "please don't do this." He looked up, and the coldness in his eyes that had once looked at me with nothing but love, broke something fundamental inside me. "I've made my decision, Velma. Based on lies they've fed you," my voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "Everything they've shown you was staged. The missing items, the emails, all of it." Hoffman cleared his throat awkwardly. "Perhaps we should continue this another time." "No," Dad said firmly. "I want this done now." He turned to me. "Velma, I gave you every advantage. The best education, a position in my company, my trust. And how do you repay me? By stealing from me, by planning to dismantle everything I built the moment I'm gone." "That's not true." Tears burned in my eyes. "Dad, I've dedicated my entire life to your company, to carrying on your legacy. Why would I throw that away?" "Greed changes people," Diana interjected softly. "We've all seen it." I whirled on her. "You're talking about yourself. You and Audrey have been plotting this for months. Dad, please, remember who I am. Remember who raised me, the values you and Mom instilled in me." At the mention of my mother, Dad's expression flickered, a brief softening. For one hopeful moment, I thought I might be breaking through. Then Audrey stepped forward, tears glistening in her eyes. Tears I knew were as fake as everything else about her. "Dad, you don't need this stress. Dr. Williams said any agitation could trigger another episode." She took his hand. "We just want what's best for you. If Velma really cared, she'd want the same." Dad squeezed her hand and nodded to Hoffman. "Let's proceed." I stood frozen as Hoffman explained the changes to the will. Everything, the house, the company shares, the investments, all $4.8 million of the estate, would now go to Audrey. My name was removed completely, as if I'd never existed. "Are you certain this is what you want?" Marcus Hoffman asked, a hint of reluctance in his voice. Dad nodded firmly. "I'm of sound mind, Gerald. This is my decision." As he signed the documents with a shaking hand, Diana stepped toward me. "I think it's time you left, Velma." "You can't kick me out of my own home," I said, my voice hollow with disbelief. "Actually, she can," Hoffman interjected quietly. "The house is solely in your father's name, and as his wife, Diana has the legal right to determine who stays." The betrayal was complete. Not only was I losing my inheritance, my future, my father's trust, I was losing my home, the only connection I had left to my mother. Dad wouldn't look at me as he finished signing. Hoffman notarized the documents, his face carefully neutral. "There's one more thing," Diana said, her voice suddenly harsh. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her grandmother's diamond ring, a family heirloom she always wore. "This was in Velma's nightstand drawer this morning." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. I stared at the ring in shock. "That's impossible. I never touched your ring." Liar Diana's composed facade cracked completely. She lunged forward and slapped me hard across the face. "Get out of this house, you thief! Get out now. The sting of the slap was nothing compared to the pain of watching my father turn away, unable or unwilling to defend me. Audrey called security, men I recognized from Dad's company. They stood awkwardly in the doorway as Diana instructed them to escort me out. She can pack a bag, Dad said quietly. Give her that much at least. Under the watchful eyes of security and Diana, I packed a single suitcase. Photos of Mom, some clothes, my laptop. Diana inspected everything, removing a pair of earrings that had been my mother's. These belong to the estate now, she said coldly. I was beyond fighting. The numbness spreading through me made everything seem distant and unreal. As I was escorted down the stairs, I caught a final glimpse of my father standing in his bedroom doorway, supported by Audrey. He looked frail and diminished, a shadow of the strong man who had taught me to sail to lead, to trust my instincts. Dad, I called out one last desperate plea. Mom would be heartbroken to see this. You know that. For a moment, pain flashed across his face. Then Audrey whispered something in his ear and he turned away, closing the door on me, literally and figuratively. Security walked me to my car. One of them, James, had known me since I was a child. He looked deeply uncomfortable with his assignment. I'm sorry, Miss Velma, he said quietly. This doesn't seem right. I nodded numbly. It's not right, James. None of it is. As I drove away from the only home I'd ever known, reality began to sink in. I had no home, no inheritance, no job. Having taken leave from Quantum Secure, I was now certain Diana would ensure I was formally terminated. Most devastatingly, I had lost my father's love and trust, based on a web of lies I couldn't disprove. I checked into a modest hotel, not yet ready to make long-term plans. That night, as I sat alone in the sterile room, my phone pinged with a text message from Anna, one of the household staff who had always been kind to me. Your father passed an hour ago, peaceful in his sleep. I'm so sorry you weren't there. It wasn't right. The grief hit me like a physical blow. My father was gone, and our last interaction had been one of accusation and betrayal. I would never get the chance to clear my name, to restore his faith in me, to say goodbye properly. The next morning, another text from Anna: funeral Thursday at Lakeside Memorial. Diana says, you're not welcome. I thought you should know. Not welcome at my own father's funeral. The final indignity. I went anyway, standing at the back of the crowded service, wearing large sunglasses and a hat for disguise. I watched Diana play the grieving widow, perfectly accepting condolences with dignified tears. Audrey stood beside her, the picture of the devastated daughter, now the heir to everything my father had built. When several of Dad's old friends approached me with confused, awkward condolences, word quickly reached Diana. She sent security to escort me out, creating a quiet scene that had mourners whispering behind their programs. Your father didn't want you here, Diana hissed as I was led away. Have you no respect? The humiliation was complete. Not only had I lost everything material, but my reputation was in tatters. The story Diana and Audrey spread, of the greedy daughter caught stealing from her dying father, followed me like a shadow. With my savings rapidly dwindling, I found a small apartment in a less desirable part of town and took a job waiting tables at a diner. The work was exhausting and paid barely enough for rent, but it allowed me time to think, to plan, to nurse the small flame of hope that somehow, someday, the truth would emerge. Every night I fell into bed physically exhausted but mentally alert, replaying the events leading to my exile, searching for clues I might have missed. Dad's last words to me, repeated in my dreams. I thought I knew you, Velma. And I would wake with tears on my face, whispering back to his memory. You did know me, Dad. Better than anyone. And somewhere deep down you still do. 3 weeks after Dad's funeral, I hit rock bottom. My apartment's ceiling leaked during a rainstorm, soaking the few possessions I had managed to salvage. The diner cut my hours after business slowed. My final attempt to access my work email at Quantum Secure was met with an account deactivated message. That night, sitting on my soggy mattress in the dim light of a single lamp, I allowed myself to fully feel the weight of everything I'd lost. I sobbed until my throat was raw, until no more tears would come. When exhaustion finally claimed me, I dreamed of sailing with Dad and Mom, the three of us laughing as we navigated clear blue waters. I woke with Mom's voice echoing in my mind. The Thompson women don't give up, Velma. we fight. Something shifted inside me. The grief and shock that had paralyzed me began to harden into resolve. If Diana and Audrey thought I would simply disappear, accepting defeat, they had fundamentally misunderstood who I was, who my parents had raised me to be. I started with what little I had my knowledge of Dad's business and personal affairs. During my years at Quantum Secure, I had built relationships with many of Dad's oldest colleagues and friends. One in particular came to mind: Jackson Reynolds, Dad's original business partner, who had semi-retired 5 years earlier but remained on the board. Jackson had always been kind to me, treating me like a niece or second daughter. More importantly, he had been skeptical of Diana from the beginning, though he kept his opinions private out of respect for Dad's choices. I found his number in my personal contacts, and after several deep breaths to steady myself, made the call. Velma. His voice registered surprise. "My God, child, where have you been? No one at the company will tell me anything except that you're no longer with the organization." "It's a long story, Uncle Jack," I said, using my childhood nickname for him. "And not a pleasant one. Do you have time to meet?" We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe far from my usual haunts. When Jackson arrived, his shock at my appearance was evident. I had lost weight, and the strain of recent weeks showed clearly on my face. "Tell me everything," he said, and I did, from the earliest warning signs to the final devastating exile from my home and father's deathbed. Jackson listened without interruption, his expression darkening as my story unfolded. When I finished, he sat in silence for a long moment. "I believe there was something off about that revision," he finally said. "Marcus told me years ago that he had set everything up for you to take over." The sudden change made no sense, especially given Audrey's complete lack of interest or experience in the business. Hope flickered. "You believe me?" "Of course I believe you. I've known you since you were in pigtails, Velma, and I knew your father better than almost anyone. This whole situation stinks to high heaven." For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight on my chest lighten slightly. Having just one person believe me made an immeasurable difference. "The problem," Jackson continued, "is proving any of it. From what you've told me, Diana and Audrey were meticulous in their setup, and with Marcus gone." "I know," I said quietly. "It's my word against theirs, and they have all the power now." Jackson reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Not all the power. They may control the company and the estate for now, but they don't control the truth, and they certainly don't control me." Over the next several days, Jackson became my ally and informant. He reported that Audrey had immediately installed herself as CEO of Quantum Secure, despite having zero qualifications. Key executives were resigning in protest. Major clients were expressing concerns about the company's new direction. "She's running it into the ground," Jackson told me during our third meeting. "She's already talking about selling off the patent portfolio to a competitor. Your father would be devastated." The news hurt, but it also strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about my inheritance anymore. It was about protecting Dad's legacy. A small breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Maria, who had been our housekeeper for 15 years, contacted me through Jackson. "Miss Velma," she said when we met secretly at a park, her eyes darting nervously as if expecting to be followed. "I didn't believe what they said about you. Not for 1 minute." She pressed a small key into my palm. "Your father gave me this 2 months before he died. He said if anything ever happened to him, I should make sure you got it. I tried to find you after the funeral, but they wouldn't tell anyone where you'd gone." I stared at the key. "Did he say what it opens?" Maria shook her head. "No, just that you would know when the time came." The key was small and ornate, obviously not for a standard door. I turned it over in my hand, searching my memory for its significance. It wasn't until later that night, lying awake in my apartment, that the answer came to me. "Rainy day plans," I whispered to myself. It was a phrase Dad had used throughout my childhood. Whenever he added money to my college fund or made a new investment, he'd wink and call it rainy day planning. As I grew older, I realized it was his way of referring to contingency plans, backup systems, safety nets. The key had to be for a safety deposit box, but which bank? Dad had accounts at several financial institutions. I started with First National, where he kept his primary business accounts. The manager, upon seeing me, became immediately uncomfortable. "Miss Winters," he said stiffly, I was instructed that you no longer have authorization to access any accounts associated with your father or Quantum Secure. I'm not here about those accounts, I explained, showing him the key. I believe my father had a personal safety deposit box here. His discomfort increased. I can't discuss that with you. Mrs. Winters was very explicit about restricting your access to all banking information. This key was given to me directly by my father, I pressed. It has nothing to do with Diana or the company accounts. The manager's eyes darted to the key, then back to my face. I'm sorry. Without proper documentation, I cannot help you. I left frustrated, but with one important piece of information, his reaction confirmed that a safety deposit box existed. Now I just needed to find a way to access it legally. My next call was to Martin Reeves' dad's original attorney, who had been pushed aside by Diana in favor of Gerald Hoffman. Martin, I said when he answered. It's Velma Winters. A pause. Velma. I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. I need your help, I said, getting straight to the point. Dad left me a key to what I believe is a safety deposit box. I think he suspected something might happen and left evidence or instructions for me. Martin sighed heavily. Velma, I want to help you. What happened wasn't right, but legally my hands are tied. All your father's assets are now controlled by Diana and Audrey through the revised will. But if Dad gave me this key directly before the will change, doesn't that mean whatever is in that box was meant for me? Possibly, Martin said, his lawyer's caution evident, but proving that will be difficult, especially given the circumstances of your departure from the family. I pushed back tears of frustration. There has to be a way. After a long pause, Martin spoke carefully. The revised will has not yet gone through probate. During that process, if evidence of coercion or undue influence emerged, a judge might consider temporarily freezing assets pending investigation. A small opening, but an opening nonetheless. What kind of evidence would be needed? Substantial proof. Documented threats, testimony from credible witnesses, clear evidence of manipulation. It's a high bar, Velma. I thought of Maria of Jackson, of the household staff who had sent condolences despite Diana's narrative. I might be able to gather more than they expect. Over the next week, I worked tirelessly, reaching out to everyone who might have witnessed Diana and Audrey's behavior in the months before Dad's death. Most were too afraid of legal repercussions to go on record, but a few provided written statements about unusual occurrences and concerning behaviors. Jackson contributed financial records showing suspicious transfers from company accounts to offshore holdings just days after Dad's death. Maria provided a detailed timeline of when certain items went missing and when they were discovered in my possession. It wasn't enough for a slam-dunk case, but it was enough for Martin to file a petition questioning the validity of the revised will and requesting a temporary hold on the distribution of assets pending investigation. Diana's reaction was swift and furious. Her attorneys filed counter-motion after counter-motion, painting me as a disgruntled, disinherited daughter trying to circumvent my father's clearly stated wishes. The legal battle quickly consumed my remaining savings, forcing me to move to an even smaller apartment and pick up additional shifts at the diner. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Gerald Hoffman, the attorney who had overseen the will changes, contacted Martin. I've been troubled by certain aspects of that last revision, he admitted when we met in Martin's office. Marcus was heavily medicated that day. While technically conscious and verbal, his capacity for complex decision-making was questionable at best. Are you willing to state that officially? Martin asked. Hoffman hesitated. I could lose my license if it's proven I knowingly executed legal documents for a client with diminished capacity. Or you could do the right thing, I said quietly. Help me restore my father's true wishes. After several more meetings and careful legal maneuvering, we filed a stronger petition with Hoffman's cautiously worded statement attached. This time, the judge granted a temporary injunction, preventing Diana and Audrey from selling any major assets or making substantial changes to Quantum Secure until the matter was resolved. Most importantly, the judge ordered that the contents of any and all safety deposit boxes in Marcus Winters' name be inventoried in the presence of representatives from both sides. When Diana's attorney received the order, their reaction confirmed we were on the right track. They filed emergency motions to block access specifically to the safety deposit box at First National, claiming it contained sensitive personal items with no relevance to the estate. The judge denied their motion and a date was set for the official opening of the box. As I prepared for what felt like the final confrontation, I received one more unexpected piece of support. A young lab technician from the hospital where Dad had been treated contacted me through Jackson. She had been reviewing records and found something concerning discrepancies in Dad's medication logs during his home care. The dosages recorded by the home health nurse don't match what was prescribed, she explained. He was receiving much higher doses of pain medication than ordered, which would have increased confusion and suggestibility. Can you provide documentation of this? I asked, hardly daring to hope. I already have, she said. I sent copies to the medical board and to your attorney. What they did wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. Armed with this new evidence and the court order to open the safety deposit box, I finally felt the tide turning. The truth was emerging piece by painful piece. The night before the scheduled box opening, I dreamed again of sailing with Dad. This time, instead of carefree laughter, he was teaching me to navigate through a storm. Trust your instincts when the waters get rough, he said, just as he had in life. The truth is, your compass, Velma. It will guide you home. I woke with tears on my face, but they were different now. Not tears of despair, but of determination. Whatever was in that safety deposit box, I was finally ready to face it. The morning of the safety deposit box opening dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions raging within me. I dressed carefully in the most professional outfit I could assemble from my depleted wardrobe. A simple black dress and blazer I'd worn countless times to quantum-secure meetings in what now felt like another lifetime. Martin picked me up in his sensible sedan, his normally calm demeanor showing signs of tension. "Are you ready for this?" he asked as we pulled away from my apartment building. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, smoothing invisible wrinkles from my skirt. "Whatever's in that box, it's our best chance at the truth." We arrived at First National Bank 15 minutes early. The branch manager, Mr. Peterson, greeted us with the careful neutrality of someone caught between warring parties. "The conference room is prepared," he informed us. Mrs. Winters and her daughter arrived a few minutes ago, along with their attorneys. My stomach tightened at the thought of facing Diana and Audrey again. Our only interaction since my exile had been through lawyers and court filings. "Remember," Martin murmured as we followed Peterson down a hallway, regardless of what happens in there. "Stay calm. Let the evidence speak for itself." The conference room fell silent as we entered. Diana sat rigidly at the table, draped in expensive black, as if still in deep mourning. Beside her, Audrey wore a carefully constructed expression of wounded innocence. Their lead attorney, Bradford Wells, a shark-like man with cold eyes, stood as we entered. "Miss Winters," he acknowledged with minimal courtesy. "Let's proceed with this unnecessary exercise so my clients can return to grieving in peace." I bit back a retort about their particular brand of grieving, which had included Audrey's recent purchase of a Ferrari and Diana's weekend trips to Aspen. Instead, I took my seat silently, feeling their eyes on me, assessing how far I'd fallen from the polished executive I'd once been. Judge Eleanor Michaels, appointed by the court to oversee the proceedings, called the meeting to order. "We are here pursuant to case number 47,293 inches re-estate of Marcus Winters. The court has ordered an inventory of safety deposit box number 413 at First National Bank registered to Marcus Winters. The contents will be cataloged and photographed, but remain in bank custody pending further court orders." Mr. Peterson produced the box and placed it on the table. It was larger than I'd expected, about the size of a small suitcase. "Both parties have provided keys," the judge continued. "Bank protocol requires 2 keys for access, the customer key and the bank's master key. Mr. Peterson will now open the box." The room held its collective breath as Peterson inserted both keys and turned them simultaneously. The lock clicked and he lifted the lid. From my position, I couldn't immediately see the contents, but Diana's sharp intake of breath told me something significant was inside. Peterson carefully removed the items one by one, placing them on the table, a sealed envelope addressed to me in Dad's handwriting, a small leather journal, a USB drive, a folder of documents, and most surprisingly, a portable hard drive with a sticky note that read Security Footage, Home Office. Please proceed with the inventory Judge Michaels directed. Peterson opened the envelope, first removing several pages of Dad's distinctive stationery. A letter addressed to Velma Winters, he stated for the record, then continued with the other items. Personal journal of Marcus Winters, dates covering approximately the last 6 months of his life. USB drive labeled Backup, Important. Folder containing what appear to be medical records and legal documents. External hard drive containing security footage. Diana's attorney intervened. Your Honor, these items are clearly personal effects with no bearing on the estate matter. My clients request they be returned to the estate administrators immediately. On the contrary, Martin countered smoothly, these items appear to be evidence Mr. Winters deliberately preserved, anticipating the very situation we now find ourselves in. The court ordered full disclosure of the box contents, and we request they be examined here and now. Judge Michaels considered briefly. The court ordered inventory and preservation of evidence. We will proceed with examining these items. Diana's face tightened with barely controlled fury. Beside her, Audrey had gone pale. The letter was read first. Dad's familiar handwriting brought tears to my eyes as Peterson read aloud. Mi dearest Velma. If you're reading this, I fear the worst has happened. I've suspected for some time that Diana and Audrey have been manipulating situations in the house, particularly regarding missing items and strange occurrences. At first, I dismissed these concerns as paranoia brought on by medication and illness. However, several incidents convinced me something sinister was underway. I began keeping the journal included here, documenting my observations and concerns. I also installed a small security camera in my study after finding my papers repeatedly disturbed. Most troubling of all, I've noticed, my mental clarity varies dramatically depending on who administers my medication. After you help me, I have hours of lucidity. After Diana or the nurse she hired, I experience confusion, memory lapses, and unusual suspicion, particularly toward you. I've arranged for blood tests through my old friend Dr. Thomas Klein, bypassing my regular physicians who report to Diana. The results included in the folder show concerning levels of medications beyond my prescribed dosages. If I've been manipulated into changing my will or turning against, you know that my true wishes remain as they've always been. You are my daughter, my legacy, and the rightful heir to everything I've built. The documents in the folder include my original will and trust documents. Trust Jackson and Martin. They've been instructed to help you if something happens to me. Remember what I taught you about sailing through storms, Velma. The truth is your compass. It will guide you home. All my love, Dad. The room fell silent as Peterson finished reading. I couldn't look at Diana or Audrey, focusing instead on maintaining my composure as tears threatened to overflow. Next came the journal. Dad had meticulously documented inconsistencies in his medication times when items mysteriously disappeared, only to be found among my belongings, and overheard conversations between Diana and Audrey when they thought he was sleeping. Most damning was his documentation of the day, before Gerald Hoffman arrived to change the will. Diana increased my pain medication herself today, ignoring Nancy's dosage chart. When I questioned her, she claimed doctor's orders had changed. I pretended to swallow the pills but secreted them away. My suspicions are now certainties. The medical records confirmed abnormally high levels of both pain medications and sedatives in Dad's system on dates that corresponded exactly with major decisions, including the day the will was changed. When Peterson connected the hard drive to the conference room computer, the security footage provided the final, irrefutable proof. Crisp, clear video showed Audrey entering Dad's study late at night, removing items from his collection, then later planting those same items in my room. Another clip showed Diana replacing pills in Dad's medication container. Most shocking of all was footage of Audrey accessing Dad's computer, creating emails in my name, discussing plans to sell company assets. The timestamp showed this occurring at 3 a.m. when I had been asleep in my room. As the evidence mounted, Diana's composure cracked. This proves nothing, she snapped. Marcus was confused, paranoid. These recordings could have been doctored. The timestamps and digital signatures are intact, the court's technical expert confirmed. There's no evidence of tampering. Audrey, perhaps sensing the inevitable, suddenly stood. "This is ridiculous. You can't possibly believe." "Sit down, Miss Henderson," Judge Michaels ordered sharply. "These proceedings will continue in an orderly fashion." But the most shocking revelation came last. Among the legal documents was a DNA test report dated just 2 months before Dad died. Peterson read the conclusion aloud. "DNA analysis confirms subject Audrey Henderson shows no biological relationship to Diana Henderson." Diana went white. "That's impossible," she whispered. "It appears," Martin said quietly, "that there were more deceptions at play than even we realized." Judge Michaels called for a brief recess. As the room cleared, I remained seated, overwhelmed by the vindication, but also by the depth of betrayal my father had experienced in his final months. When proceedings resumed 30 minutes later, the atmosphere had changed dramatically. Diana's attorney requested a private consultation with Judge Michaels. When they returned, Wells announced that his clients were prepared to withdraw their objections to the original will and trust documents. Furthermore, he stated stiffly, "Mrs. Winters acknowledges that certain irregularities occurred during Mr. Winters' final illness that may have unduly influenced his decision-making capacity." It was as close to an admission of guilt as we were likely to get in that forum. Judge Michaels made her ruling swiftly. "Based on the compelling evidence presented today, I am setting aside the revised will dated May 15th. The original will and trust documents will be reinstated pending formal probate proceedings. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of potential criminal charges including fraud, elder abuse, and identity theft." She turned to me directly. "Miss Winters, while final probate will take time, I am issuing an immediate order restoring your position as primary beneficiary and trustee of your father's estate. You will have immediate access to family residences and accounts frozen during these proceedings." Diana stood abruptly. "This isn't over," she hissed at me before her attorney pulled her toward the door. Audrey lingered a moment longer, her expression unreadable. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "your father loved you until the end. Even when he thought you'd betrayed him, he mourned what he'd lost more than what he thought you'd taken." Before I could respond, she followed Diana out, leaving me to wonder if that small moment of honesty was her only gift to me or her final manipulation. As we left the bank, reporters who had somehow gotten wind of the proceedings waited outside. Flashbulbs popped as Martin guided me through the crowd with a firm, "No comment at this time." In the privacy of his car, I finally allowed the emotions of the day to surface. Relief, vindication, grief. They poured out in heaving sobs that seemed to come from the very core of my being. Martin waited silently, offering a handkerchief and the space to feel everything I'd been holding back. "What happens now?" I asked when I could finally speak again. "Now," he said gently, "you begin rebuilding. Your father left you the tools and the truth. The rest is up to you." That evening I returned not to my tiny apartment but to my childhood home. The security guards who had once escorted me out now welcomed me with awkward deference. The house was eerily quiet, Diana and Audrey having vacated that afternoon under the supervision of court officers. I walked slowly through the rooms, reacquainting myself with spaces that had once been as familiar as my own heartbeat. In Dad's study I stood where he must have placed his hidden camera, seeing the room from his perspective. The desk where Audrey had impersonated me, the shelves from which treasured items had been removed and used against me. On his desk calendar in the final week of his life, he had written a single word in his distinctive handwriting, Velma. Even as they poisoned his mind against me, some part of him had held on to his faith in his daughter. I moved to the window overlooking the bay where we had sailed countless times. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. "I found my way home, Dad," I whispered to the gathering dusk. "Just like you knew I would." The weeks following the safety deposit box revelation passed in a blur of legal meetings, depositions, and difficult decisions. The district attorney's office launched a formal investigation into Diana and Audrey, focusing on charges of elder abuse, fraud, and illegal administration of prescription drugs. Diana fled to Europe before charges could be filed, emptying personal accounts, but leaving the estate assets untouched, likely on advice from her attorneys. Audrey, however, remained to face the consequences, perhaps recognizing that running would only make her situation worse. When the full story became public, former household staff came forward with additional accounts of manipulation and mistreatment. Nancy, the original home health nurse who had been replaced by Diana's choice, revealed she had been fired after questioning changes to Dad's medication schedule. I tried to report my concerns, she told investigators, but Mrs. Winters threatened legal action if I interfered with what she called family matters. The most surprising development came during Audrey's formal deposition. Faced with overwhelming evidence and serious criminal charges, she offered a full confession in exchange for leniency. It was Diana's idea initially, she testified, her polished facade finally cracking. She discovered Marcus was worth far more than she'd estimated when they married. The original plan was just to secure a larger portion of the inheritance for me, minor manipulations, to make Velma look unstable or irresponsible. But when Marcus was diagnosed with terminal illness, Diana saw an opportunity for everything. Most shocking was Audrey's revelation about her true identity. Diana isn't my mother. We're not even related. We met at a resort in Palm Springs 4 years ago. I was working as a concierge, and she recognized something useful in me, my ability to adapt to become whatever people wanted to see. She offered me a partnership. I would pose as her daughter, help secure Marcus's fortune, and we'd split the proceeds. The deception had been elaborate and long-running. Audrey, whose real name was Jennifer Parker, had created an entire fictional background as Diana's daughter from her first marriage. They had gambled that no one would investigate too deeply, and they'd been right, until Dad's hidden DNA test exposed the truth. Audrey, divided by Jennifer, was sentenced to 5 years for fraud and elder abuse with additional time suspended based on her cooperation. Diana remained in hiding somewhere in southern Europe, her assets frozen, an international warrant issued for her arrest. As for me, the legal vindication brought relief, but couldn't immediately heal the deeper wounds. I had my inheritance, my home, my rightful position at Quantum Securien, Aversiad, 206 yen, but I had lost my father under the cruelest circumstances imaginable. His final memories of me had been tainted by their lies, our last interactions, painful and unresolved. The night after all legal proceedings were finally complete, I sat alone in Dad's study, surrounded by the artifacts of his life, photos of our family in happier times, sailing trophies we'd won together, the model ships he'd painstakingly built during long winter evenings. I should have protected you better, I whispered to his memory. I saw the warning signs but didn't act quickly enough. Grief and guilt had become my constant companions. I threw myself into work, taking formal control of Quantum Secure and beginning the process of rebuilding client trust damaged during Audrey's brief tenure. The company had suffered, but its foundation remained solid. It was Jackson who finally forced me to confront my emotional state. 3 months after the court victory, he found me working at midnight in Dad's home office, surrounded by stacks of contracts and financial reports. "Enough," he said firmly, closing my laptop. "This isn't what Marcus would want for you." "I'm restoring his legacy," I protested weakly. "You're hiding," Jackson countered. "The company's stable again. You've proven your competence to every doubting board member. But you're not living, Velma. You're just existing." His words hit with the force of truth. I had reclaimed my inheritance, but remained captive to the trauma of betrayal and loss. "I don't know how to move forward," I admitted. "Everything feels tainted." Jackson's expression softened. "Start by forgiving yourself. Marcus didn't die because of anything you did or didn't do. He was targeted by predators who recognized his vulnerability. But if I'd been more vigilant, then they would have found another approach," he interrupted gently. "People like Diana and Audrey are expert manipulators. Your father was brilliant in business, but trusting in personal matters. That's why they were able to exploit him." Over the following weeks, I began the painful process of healing. I found a therapist specializing in grief and betrayal trauma. I reconnected with old friends who had reached out after the truth became public. I even contacted Maria and the other household staff who had stood by me, offering them positions if they wished to return. 6 months after reclaiming my inheritance, I established the Marcus Winters Foundation for Elder Protection, dedicated to preventing financial exploitation and abuse of vulnerable seniors. Using a portion of my inheritance, we funded research, education, and legal advocacy for victims. At the Foundation's launch event, I spoke publicly about our family's experience for the first time. My father was intelligent, successful, and surrounded by people who loved him, I told the assembled guests. Yet he still fell victim to manipulation and abuse in his most vulnerable moments. If it could happen to him, it could happen to anyone. The Foundation quickly gained support from unexpected quarters. Several of Dad's business competitors contributed substantial donations. Former clients who had distanced themselves during the scandal returned with expressions of support. Most surprising was the letter that arrived from Audrey, or Jennifer as she now identified herself, 8 months into her prison sentence. "I don't expect or deserve forgiveness," she wrote. "But I need you to know that your father never stopped loving you. Even at his most confused and manipulated, he would look at your photo and smile. Diana worked constantly to poison him against you, but something in him resisted completely letting go of his daughter." The letter contained information about offshore accounts. Diana had established details that helped authorities track her movements in Europe. Jennifer's cooperation eventually led to Diana's capture in Monaco and extradition to face charges. Diana's eventual trial exposed the full extent of her calculated cruelty. Evidence showed she had targeted Marcus from the beginning, researching wealthy widowers and crafting her approach specifically to appeal to him. The woman who had pretended to love my father had never seen him as anything but a means to wealth. As Diana began serving her 15-year sentence, I found myself at a crossroads. The practical matters were resolved. Justice, in its imperfect way, had been served. The question remaining was how to move forward with my life in a meaningful way. The answer came unexpectedly during a charity sailing event I attended in Dad's honor. As I stood on the deck of a boat similar to the one we had sailed together, feeling the familiar rhythm of waves beneath my feet, a sense of peace washed over me for the first time in nearly 2 years. The sea doesn't forgive hesitation, Dad had taught me. When you know what's right, act with confidence. I realized then that moving forward didn't mean forgetting or even fully healing from what had happened. It meant charting a new course while honoring the journey that had brought me here. In the year that followed, I expanded both the company and the foundation, finding purpose in continuing Dad's business legacy while creating something new in his name. I reconnected with old sailing friends, finding joy again in the activity that had once bound our family together. I even visited Jennifer in prison once, not seeking additional information or closure, but simply to look into the eyes of someone who had caused so much damage and find them human after all, flawed, broken, but not the monster I had built in my mind. That visit wasn't about forgiveness, it was about reclaiming my own power from the shadow her actions had cast over my life. 2 years after the court victory, I stood at the bow of my new sailboat, christened Truth Compass in honor of Dad's letter, watching sunrise break over the bay. The water glittered with possibilities, the horizon open and inviting. The journey through betrayal and loss had transformed me. I was stronger now, more discerning, but not hardened against connection. I had learned that while trust can be broken in devastating ways, withholding trust entirely is its own kind of prison. My father's true legacy wasn't just the financial inheritance that Diana and Audrey had schemed to steal. It was the resilience, integrity, and courage he had instilled in me long before any of us knew how desperately I would need those qualities. The greatest inheritance wasn't measured in millions, but in the values that guided me through the darkest storm of my life and brought me safely to shore again. As I adjusted the sails to catch the morning breeze, I thought of all the people who had supported me through this journey: Jackson, Martin, Maria, and countless others who stood by truth even when lies seemed more convincing. I thought of Dad, whose final act of love was leaving me the tools to reclaim not just my inheritance, but my place in the world. "I'm okay, Dad," I whispered to the wind, "and I'm going to be even better." Have you ever had to fight to reclaim something that was rightfully yours? Or dealt with betrayal from someone you trusted? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more real-life journeys, and share with someone who might need to know they're not alone in navigating life's storms. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes our greatest strength emerges from our most painful challenges.